Welcome. Thank you for joining us for What's Your Strategy for Avoiding Risk in BPM today with Smarter Solutions. We have Rick and Forrest here today presenting this webinar. And Rick has over 20 years of Lean and Six Sigma experience as a practitioner, and he's one of Smarter Solutions' senior instructors. Through his career, he's certified as a master black belt, a champion, and a yellow belt, along with teaching and certifying professionals in all the Lean Six Sigma areas. His personal Lean Six Sigma work has spanned nearly all business types, including manufacturing, transactional, and research and development. How are you today, Rick?
Hey, things are good, and I'm going to introduce Forrest here, too. Forrest is the CEO and owner of Smarter Solutions. He's been in this business for a long time, and the Smarter Solutions itself, his own personal company. 22 years, is it, Forrest?
Yeah, it's a long time here.
Yeah. He's a prolific book writer and has written lately the Integrated Enterprise Excellence series, which talks about Lean and Six Sigma topics, but also some topics that we're going to talk about towards BPM as we run through this in his Volume 2 book about really the business systems that help manage improvements and processes. I guess we're ready to go, Forrest.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Well, we're going to get into business process management. And it really ties into what Rick was just talking about on the Integrated Enterprise Excellence. So we're kind of adding a more spin to what we've had in the past. Now, when you start looking on the Internet for business process management, there's some quotes that we're going to be going in and talking to here. And it really makes a lot of sense. You know, they talk about company performance management through processes. A lot of times executives manage through the output of the process. It's, hey, we're meeting our numbers. But doesn't it really make sense that to manage through the processes? And that's one of the things that BPM really does for you. Here's another quote. Talks about helps organization gain higher customer satisfaction, product quality, delivery speed, time to market. That's really good stuff, too. It's often talked about the same kind of things in Lean Six Sigma, but what we're going to do is have a BPM spin today. Now, Wikipedia has something to say about it in that it's improving efficiency and so on. So that's really good stuff, and that's what we're going to be sharing with you, how we might be able to actually help implement that.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. If you've known Smarter Solutions, we've talked about the Integrated Enterprise Excellence System. We've talked about Lean Six Sigma, a lot of really good things that can help organizations and businesses grow. We're moving into the business process management realm now because we're seeing leveraging these things we've learned in that Lean Six Sigma world are really great when we look at this new idea of business process management. Why we like it is it can give great benefits to companies through things that we probably all know about. Standardized practices, automating of workflows. Now workflows, they're talking at some level an end-to-end or a value stream that we would have talked to in the other world, but it's somewhat trying to put them into computer management rather than just humans working. Through that, you can get a greater customer experience, greater efficiency in your business, and a lot of great things that you get through this business process management. And Smarter Solutions piece of this somewhat is about bringing the management back to it. And think about that. Why would a business not want to do this?
Yeah, that's good stuff because that's really important to actually implement all these things and actually have this occur. But the question is, how do you do it? And how do you go about it without having a lot of risks that go along with it?
So we're really going to be talking about this, about the risks of starting a business process management initiative in your business or tying your name to one that's going on today. So like any big initiative, there are risks, right? In this case, there's software risks, IT costs, and wasted money and efforts to put something together that doesn't end up being successful. A lot of labor, training that goes along with the participants. And I guess probably the biggest waste for us is in a couple of years, you've spent a lot of money and time, and you're right where you started.
Yeah, we've seen that happen a lot of times. People try TQM, Lean Six Sigma, and various other programs, and they find out they spent a lot of money, and it just did not really help them as much as they thought it would. And we don't want that to happen on this.
No, I mean, it's another program of the month. All of you have probably seen them in your organizations. And we have experienced it with clients with Lean Six Sigma over and over again. But it's really the same thing. You're bringing a key cultural change to the business. And if you don't work it right, the risks are real high. But we believe you can, with a little thought, using some of the integrated enterprise excellence tools, to avoid or minimize these risks both financially and to your career too. Because it is about you too, isn't it, Forrest?
It sure is. And I actually had a conversation with someone just the other day about he was involved in the continuous improvement efforts, and now they're changing their direction again, just like we talked about. And now he's asking me if I knew about any opportunities. It happens all the time.
But there are risks. Your reputation, this is a tough one, continued employment, that you get your name tied to something that doesn't work out, they let you go as the program does. I think the one that would hurt me more is my influence within the organization. You back something that doesn't work, it catches up with you. But we want you to do it right and really your career take a turn. And now, Forrest, before we move on, we forgot to bring some up at the first. For logistics, when we run this webinar, there is a interface in the GoToWebinar. We would love for you to ask questions, all of your participants. The voice has been muted. We will not hear you talking on your phone. You will only hear us. But we would like you to type in questions on the interface that should be on the upper right of your screen, questions about the slides, questions about the topic or anything. We may answer them real time while we're talking or hold them till the end. But please enter questions. Thank you, everybody. Next one. Things that haven't turned out well. I think back at CompUSA, now that dates us a little bit. It was an American electronics firm that did mostly computers that I think it still exists now as a website, but it was bigger than Best Buy for a while, and they were doing well. And we saw in the CLO magazine, Chief Learning Officer, that they were promoting this creation of an extraordinarily good onboarding process for bringing on their salespeople so they can make them better salesmen faster. A lot of kudos and awards were given them to it for it. But the week after that article came out, they filed for bankruptcy, and we haven't seen them since. So the question is, if you tied yourself to one of these initiatives such as this, the company may go under, and you don't even know. So that's what we want you to avoid. Should they have been spending money on this process for us?
I think they could have been spending money elsewhere better.
Could they probably still be open?
That could be. What about this bowling ball coming? I can remember this. There was a conversation we had in one of the training sessions. Somebody was describing how they had been doing so much lean work in this bowling ball manufacturing company. And then I said, well, isn't that the company that had problems financially, and they were actually bought out by their competitor? And so he said, well, yeah, but we did all this efforts in lean, and we really improved all these processes. I said, yeah, but it didn't seem to help the bottom line. So that gets to be an issue. We may be able to do all these programs, but did we really line ourselves very well to the financials? And that's where I think it's really important to go in and use the lean tools and all the tools in the right place so that we're really helping the big picture, that is the financials.
Yep. Again, were they working on the right things? Doesn't appear like it. Another initiative, more recent, I guess, the JCPenney's, they were having trouble competing against the Walmarts and the Targets, so they decided they needed to turn themselves around, so they went outside and hired an Apple vice president as their new CEO. He immediately tried to turn them into an Apple-like marketing experience, so major changes in real retailing, sorry about that, philosophy and store design. Turned out that the people who stopped there, who shopped at JCPenney's, didn't care about that, and sales even dropped off more. He didn't even make it a year, and he was fired. So again, he tied his career to this new initiative that they hadn't done enough customer research, and he lost his job. So we hopefully we've made a case there is risk to the individuals involved plus the company for these big initiatives. So the real question comes up, if you were going to do a business process management effort in your business, which path would you follow? The JCPenney CEO, or would you like your company to turn out like CompUSA? And we already know the answer. It's no. We're going to talk now about how we can manage that risk within your business. Now, we are going to be speaking to business level, but honestly, generalize these to you in any initiative you're working on. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's right, because I think it's really important to look at the big picture here when we're pulling all this together so that we also do well for ourselves, but the company as a whole.
Now we have the first poll coming up. We like to do this just to get our voice of the customer a little bit. First one comes up is about your company's history of personal risk on new initiatives. So if they bring out a new initiative in your business, how much personal risk is generally associated to the leaders? Please select one or two. I guess you only get to pick one. No risk up to a lot of risk, but this is somewhat about how your company likes to shoot the messenger sometimes, to use a colloquialism. It looks like people are putting it in. We appreciate that. The winner right now is the second one on the list for percentages, which is probably good. We'll give you a few seconds here to finish up your entries. Now, Lon, if you would close the poll and post it. You guys should all see the answers. Over about 60% of you said that there's a little bit of personal risk. A couple hit, about a quarter said there is risk, and a few said huge risk. Well, I don't know who put those in, but I don't want to work there. Because that's tough, because a lot of times we're on initiatives that our boss told us to do. So what we want to, if you can take away from this, better ways to minimize your personal risk and your business risk.
But I think there's nothing, there's another point that needs to get brought up is sometimes we'll say, well, we're not going to try to do anything because there's less risk. But sometimes not doing anything is risky too. You know, you might do everything your boss says, but then all of a sudden that wasn't the right thing for you to actually be doing. So you have to kind of weigh this. Should I actually do something or not? If I'm going to do it, then I'm going to do it right.
That's right. Now, if you know Forrest and I, you know we're teachers at heart at some level. So we can't give a webinar. We're doing a little teaching along with it. So what we want to talk about is taking a little aside on the theory of constraints. Now, we'll talk about why in a minute. But the theory of constraints, big in manufacturing in the late 90s. I worked in manufacturing then, and I think everybody read the book who was in a management role. The book was called The Goal, and what it was about is about identifying the constraint of your business, and that's where you need to make improvements. All right? Improvements to a non-constraint where ineffectual, didn't work, didn't matter. So if we look at the CompUSA item, was onboarding bringing people on a constraint to their business? And I'd say apparently not, because they still closed. How about the efficiency of the factory for the bowling ball company, Forrest? Do you think that was a constraint?
Well, that's exactly the problem. Are you working on all the manufacturing processes, and maybe sales is a big deal?
Yeah, they were efficiently ready for a sale that never came.
Yep.
And in Penny's, was their sales philosophy or design of their stores a revenue constraint? Apparently not. So what we want you to do is think about this stuff as a constraint. So what is a constraint? I mean, we're not really teaching the whole thing here. But an efficient factory that has no customers, well, the constraint must be in sales because they're not producing anything. If you see people working a lot of overtime but everything is still late, it looks like the constraint may be the capacity to produce it, or even the quality is so bad they're not getting it out. Last one might be, if you can't provide your service at the prices the market demands, you probably have a constraint in your operating costs, your labor, or something that's costing you to provide the service.
Yeah, Rick, I remember doing a keynote at a major defense contractor where the general manager was presenting, and he was talking about all the work they had done in Lean. I said, oh, that's great. So I went in and viewed and toured the manufacturing facility. I said, man, you're really doing a great job in Lean, but I noticed you got a lot of idle equipment here. So what projects are you actually doing to improve the sales and marketing project or process? And then nothing. But that's a constraint. You know, so they could go in and lean out everything in the manufacturing organization, but they could actually end up closing down the facility. It happens all the time.
Yep. And the question is, why did we talk about constraints, Forrest?
We want to have people looking at the big picture and figure out where they should be focused in reference for improvements.
Because let's get talking about BPM. Business Process Management is a process-focused initiative. But if you look at that, it's still selecting something to do. It could be like an improvement. But if you work on a process that's not a constraint, you're going to spend money and resources, and nothing may change, will it?
That's exactly right. And it even makes it such that you automate that process. You can even spend a lot more money in actually doing it. And is that where you ought to be focusing your efforts?
And The theory of constraints is not in the business process management body of knowledge, which still surprised us. We're going through it, so that's why I wanted to bring it up. Let's jump back to a success story, because if we can have anecdotal stories of problems, we can also have them about good things. The Wall Street Journal in 2009 talked about the lean improvements that Starbucks was going through. Now, if you were drinking coffee at a Starbucks across that date, what you would have seen is coffee came out faster. The drive-through windows were quicker. What they did is they analyzed the business and saw that in lean terms there was too much movement within there, the transport of back and forth, so they located the coffee by the grinder, by the coffee machine. They put the syrups right next to it. They put it so that the people working there wouldn't have to move as much to deliver product, and sort of an assembly line going down. According to the article, they could almost cut their staff by one barista, which I don't know where that word came from, but one person making coffee in every store, and they actually improved the throughput through it. So see, they knew their constraint was trying to get coffee out. They fixed it. They actually made more money and had less labor costs. Another one's Target. They were losing ground to competitors if you were a Target buyer years back, but they said, we've got to keep up. But at the same time, Kmart was problems, Sears was having problems, and even Walmart a little bit. So they pilot tested a bunch of new things. One was upscale products and colors. They went to more pastels and brighter colors. They tried it. Now they pilot tested it. It worked so well, they rapidly spread it through all the stores, and revenue increased. So it's what they do. They tested, they tried, but they found their constraint was bringing people into the store. So they took their constraint on and fixed it.
But again, that's where you focused on improving the process on how you did things to actually help the financial of the organization as a whole.
Yep. Now those people working on that project for us, they probably got promoted.
Yep.
And they're probably one of the better stores now. So what does managing risk mean? We talk about risk a lot in many businesses, but I think managing risk is something we say and don't think about that much because it is a very thoughtful process. In Lean Six Sigma, you might have used an FMEA to go do that. Let's talk about respect to this business level BPM deployment. In BPM, they talk about something called enterprise process management. I think it's an E instead of a business. So it's really the business side rather than the process side of BPM. What you do is they talk about planning an examination of your business before you decide where to implement can really help your risk reduction. Because if you understand your business constraints, you can actually plan where I want to use these BPM tools to benefit my business. Now, by doing this, working on your constraint, putting performance metrics and stuff they talk about, you will now be able to decide at what level I want to implement from a full BPM software suite from one of the big players down to some quite simple ones that are not near as expensive and intuitive. But it depends what you need. Why would you go buy a Mercedes when you could have got by with a nice little Prius or something like that, correct?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is if you're searching on the internet for business process management, there's not much talk about the EPM aspects of it. And we think that that's a shortcoming of the way most people address BPM. They just don't think about the enterprise as much as we think they should.
That's right. And where we've got this from, and I think the best reference we could give you if you want to read up on it, it's really from the Association of Business Process Management Professionals, ABPMP. It's a tough an acronym to say. But they're trying to put together a body of knowledge that you need to really implement and manage a good business process management system. And we have a copy of their graphic here. That they say there's 5 major competencies that you need to learn, but they're inside of the business process management organization. And that's the management of the processes. But around that becomes your enterprise process management. It's really the business system that is using the process management. And they said all that is nested within technologies that allow it to go. So is it a surprise, I guess, that BPM alone is not enough? I think the fours deny it wasn't. We've seen Six Sigma collapse when it's all by itself. So when you talk about the enterprise management system, EPM, this allows you to properly apply the tools. It ensures that the middle management and the constraints are acted upon properly, but also ensures that you get your benefits. They're internalized, they're sustained. sort of like the picture on the right, that you have an enterprise process management system that holds up the BPM system that allows your workforce to execute your processes right that support the customers. But if you pull any one of those out, you either won't perform as highly, or you may also struggle and fall. Now, this body of knowledge book that we referenced is just a body of knowledge book. It doesn't tell you how, it tells you what. As I recall, ASQ has something similar for the Lean Six Sigma belts too, doesn't it?
Yes, they got a body of knowledge on that too, but it doesn't really have a roadmap for pulling it all together in the case of Lean Six Sigma, and similarly with BPM. How do you pull it all together?
It's just a list of topics. Doesn't even, what's interesting, they don't even tell you why the topic's in there, do they? They just list it. So it's somewhere, there's an unwritten assumption here that you've got a good business management system that can support this. Do you? I could make a cynical case, couldn't I, that if you had a great business management system, you wouldn't be looking at BPM, would you? Because everything would be working right. Because honestly, BPM doesn't need a computer system. It's really, the M is probably the most important one, the management side of it. So let's get back to risks. Now, I can remind you, if you have questions, please type them in, and we will answer them. Pre-planning again. Almost all risk reductions end up with planning before you actually do anything. So a big one is applying it. Finding your constraints is one of the things you do to reduce your risk. So you're applying it first where you get the most benefit. Now, how do you find a constraint? At some level, it's a straight-up theory of constraints issue, but some clues are, is using your performance measures, analytically examining the processes in the business. It helps you find where things aren't doing what they should. That can help you find constraints, and it's not on the slide, but huge amounts of overtime, late deliveries, those kind of things are also good things to find constraints. Then apply the BPM methods that are in areas that are strategically aligned to your needs and your constraints. That's what the enterprise process management is about. We just got someone to type in, thank you, that some of the audio is garbled. Hopefully that's just not us talking. We have had problems at times if you're on voice over IP. Telephones you should look at work a little better. It's based on the bandwidth of your business or your home. We will try to speak a little slower and make it a little clearer, so we apologize for that. But thank you for putting in the comment. This pre-planning can help you avoid the risks. You can be a Starbucks instead of a CompUSA or a Target instead of a Penny's. But again, you plan, know what to apply, then you can actually help you pick your software. As Forrest stated earlier, that when you just search on BPM, it's all about the software. It's all about the process because that's who's making money on it. You buy the software, you're stuck with them right now. And you have to almost fill in or backfill the EPM in there to make it work. But if you build your business process up first to support BPM, I think it will always be more successful. Sounds simple? Well, darn it, it is. You guys can do it. I mean, who knows? When you remove constraints and manage your process better, you may not even need an expensive software system. Someone wrote in, it says, what tool would you start with, or who might you start with a BPM system? There's a lot of reasons to start, but as you can tell what we're talking about now, we'd recommend getting with, I mean, it could be us, Smarter Solutions, or get someone to work at your management system to identify your constraints and to decide what you need to do. If you talk to like IBM, they're going to tell you to buy your software first and just start automating processes and workflows. Well, they both are paths to success. But the difficulty is you might not, you're in the early part, work on things that help your deployment. So we'd say where you start is, see, Forrest, for tools. Good scorecards, good analysis tools, good linkage of your functional processes down to your process. Now, we would use a value chain and 30,000-foot control charting, but there's other ways that can get there, but you want to start from the why the business is there, find your constraints, and then decide what to do. And both of us know here that you can apply all the BPM principles without that software and pilot test it, can't you?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that we're kind of getting a little ahead of ourselves, or I'm getting a little ahead of ourselves. I like to start with the value chain, which is describing what you do and how you measure what you do. So then you get the big picture point of view. You know, like Peter Senge talks about a learning organization. So how do you put together the data so that you can readily look at it and really determine out where you should be focusing your improvement efforts for this bottleneck, because that's going to give you the most effort on it. Now, the other thing with BPM is you can have the day-to-day management of it too. You know, but the thing is, right now what we've been focusing is on the rules and the policies and things that you should actually do to really positively help the big picture.
And if I may make a little plug for marketing, this is the first of a series of webinars we'll be doing over the rest of the year. This one's about risk. We'll be talking about positive activities to drive a BPM implementation process. We'll walk through a little case study later in the year. So if you signed up, you'll get newsletters from us. Please read them. You'll see upcoming more and more stuff on this aspect of the business. But without software, as we said, you don't need software to know what needs to be fixed, what you should simplify, what you should standardize. Because they're managed by people, so there's ways to do it without the software to make sure you're doing the right stuff. Now, you can manage your processes, and Forrest talked about management policies, but the rules that you run your business by, it's surprising. They're all unspoken somewhat, but BPM would make you write down the rules that you live by, and some of them always have surprised me when I look at it, that why do we have that rule? And you never really understand what's holding back your business sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I believe that the rules that we actually have, or the policies, sometimes could be more valuable to change those than some of the major process improvement efforts we've had.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that whenever you start putting everything together and start looking at the big picture, that then you can gain insight to figure out where you should be focusing your efforts the most.
But what we recommend is understand your constraints, monitor performance, find the gaps, then become integrating this BP, or the enterprise process management, into your business system. At that point, Forrest, I think you're ready to go after the software side of BPM.
Yeah, and then you can use it the most effectively, because now you know that it really makes a difference. And before you actually start automating it, you want to go in and make sure that you leaned it out, you had a lot of improvement, efficiency. But what I'm suggesting is you really want to look at what needle you're trying to move. You know, and that's what I call a 30,000 foot level. And then that could be maybe the best way to do that is through automation of the process, because I got less mistakes. I can do it more efficiently and effectively, and it takes less resources.
Hey, Forrest, we got another good question. I appreciate you guys putting stuff in. Here it goes. It says, but your management must be willing to do data-based decisions before BPM will work. A big challenge.
Oh.
Now, Forrest is shaking his head, if you can imagine it right now, up and down, not right to left. Because I'll tell you, pushing it from the bottom up if you're a practitioner is always going to be hard. But at some level, this is pushing the things us Lean Six Sigma people always talk. But yes, it's always a challenge to get the business to do something. You got to look at their WIFM, you got to talk about the money, but it's always going to be a challenge.
But then the thing is, we found also some of the people that tend to be the biggest resistors, all of a sudden, once they get it, then they become the biggest disciple. So you have to approach this in an effective way, and then give us a buzz if you got a situation, because we've confronted this in a lot of different situations. We might be able to give you an idea that could help you.
And I guess someone with the company dealt with what you're dealing with.
Yep.
We go on, without software, what can you do? Many believe the software is the key point, but we believe software is really just one of the tools that you deploy BPM with. You still have to be able to build a flow chart. You still have to be able to analyze data. You still have to be able to select metrics. The software is just a tool to document it and manage it. The other part is what we need. Now, most software packages, the good ones at least, allow you to use other software, such as Visio, to diagram all your processes. Now, they use something other than standard flowchart. It's called Business Process Management Notation, and there's a 2.0 level that creates a file that almost all of them will import to build your business process. So you really can do a lot before you commit a lot of money to it. You can get a new workflow designed. You can actually check it. If you buy a process, some of the software allows you to simulate it. So you really can decide that you've optimized your process before you ever go to the software. But the neat part about it is you learn the inputs, the outputs, how to measure its performance, and also how to manage it. When you know that, you'll know what software you need, won't you?
You know, we mentioned about the value chain previously. You can actually put this BPM in within that overall value chain, so that's where it's documented for everyone to see.
All right. So if this is so good, like the person said, even if your business won't do data management, sometimes it'll be a challenge. But when you listen to the compelling reasons to go do this, why doesn't everybody do it? Well, there are reasons that are somewhat cultural. But the EPM piece, I think, can be more beneficial than the automation of the BPM. But getting automated workflows without it, sometimes you'll just fail to meet your delivery dates with less labor, but you may never have met your real constraint. And I think one that I remember from Six Sigma for us is if you standardize a bad process, you just get bad process with less people. You really don't want that. That's not probably the savings or the benefits your business want. Now, the stuff we've talked about, will it guarantee success for us?
No.
No, but I think the risk of failure is a lot smaller. Some people may decide they don't want to go there by doing this, but that's the point. You know, pilot test, same stuff we've always known. But we can all probably have ideas, and as one of my friends said that great ideas get diverted or killed by the cultural antibodies that don't want it to happen. And it is real out there. Now, we have a client we've been working with that has a mantra that lean before digitize. It came out of his previous employer. But what it did is that made BPM an IT process, so IT owns it. The sole goal is to automate it so IT can control it, or information and technology. So they've been at this process, the goal of 100% digitizing all of their human processes in 2 years. Now I'd ask, is that really a strategic goal of the business? Since it doesn't talk for us about making money or being profitable, I doubt the business really cares about the 100% goal, do they?
Yeah, no, that could be an issue, because a lot of times when you're dealing with automation, you can have, you're locking yourself in. I remember going to a major a company, and then they were just going in and trying to add a lot of automated equipment. Well, it locked them in, so they didn't have a lot of flexibility to make significant changes.
Good point. And if they also, you start improving a process that's not a constraint, they wasted some of their money and resources too. Now the question I would have is, would you want to tie yourself and your career to this effort? Interesting, our student who was into it is now trying to drive it back into linking it to the strategic needs of the business, and he's getting a little bit of resistance for us, but last time we talked to him, they're listening now, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they're not going at 100% anymore. Let's look at the next poll question. Have you heard about EPM with BPM? Here's your poll. Please pick one, only one. You've never heard of the enterprise process, part of business process management. Two, you've actually implemented along with the BPM process. Please select one that's important to you. Fits your business. Now, if you're not working a business, pick the last one you worked at or somebody you've known. Doesn't really matter. Just participate in the poll. You've been filling out. Thank you. We're going to close the poll in a few seconds. Please finish up. If you close it now, you can see what happened. About half of you had never heard of it. The next group says, I know the importance of it. Well, that's great. And we have a little bit of the other choices, but nobody had implemented it. My guess for us, if they've been listening to you or me in the past, they know about the idea of IEE and why the enterprise business management is important. But I would wonder if for the people that are driving BPM initiatives, really think about it as much as they think about the software side, because it is so much easier. So let's move on. Thank you for doing that. Always appreciate a little voice of the customer. So, we got a question before we go to the next topic. It says, do you know if a production process can be designed with an ERP system connected with BPM flows in a reasonable time? Wow, reasonable is a tough one. The relationship to the business process management and the ERP system, let's talk about that a little bit. The ERP system manages generally the HR, the financials, and the high-level stuff. A business process management system also is still an IT system that collects data in databases. You can do it interconnected to the ERP or not. They can use the same database, but generally you want the data tied together so you can use both of them in your analysis together. But reasonable time. Now, let's go off the subject with an ERP deployment. I mean, they all tell you a year, year and a half. I think we've known one, and I've been here 7 years. One company was able to do it within the time expected because they said, don't make it like my current process, just give me the right way to go do it. But most of them, they go almost 2x the scheduled time because they're trying to make the new system look like the old way, and it doesn't work well. So I don't know about reasonable. I think implementation of the initial business process management steps with automation, if you start at the high end and you have buy-in your business force, 1 to 2 months to get the enterprise process sort of understood and ready to go with some train and getting the implementation in. You might be running 2 to 6 months past that, depending on what infrastructure you need to buy. We're probably within a year if you're focused. That seem right?
Yep.
It's a hard call because depending on what infrastructure, what data systems you have, it can go quicker or slower. And I think a lot of businesses are more constrained by their spend rate they can do or by the ability to free up labor to actually do these. I know we talk about in our Lean Six Sigma stuff and projects, do you have the resources to do what you committed to? I think a lot of people start these big initiatives and don't even look at the resources being available. All right? So let's get back to our slides. Is business process management an information technology issue, or is it a business initiative? And I would propose that your success will be a lot better if it's a business management initiative rather than an IT-driven one. Because now you're looking at how you make decisions and are you running your processes right, not just can I automate them. Now, this really gets to the point, who should help you? Now, if you pick an IT vendor, they're going to help you with the IT and fit it into your business system. But remember, their job really is to get you to buy software and keep spending money with them. If you look at the other side of it, the people that are going to help you without software, they're more focused on your business getting it right. You think, Forrest?
Yep, that's true. Yeah, because you can spend a lot of money on putting the IT solutions there, but that's what people tend to be really pushing when you're looking at BPM.
Because it's always easier to buy software than to actually learn how to manage properly. Mm-hmm. And if you're not sure what we're talking about, go look up BPM jobs on like on Monster or these job sites. They're all about software programmers. And we propose that software programming is not where you start. So who's your best advocate? Well, it's you. It's not the software vendor. You know what the true benefits are. You know your constraints. You can actually try and implement and pilot test things without the automation software. Now, if we talked about in Lean Six Sigma terms, when Forrest and I work with companies, what they're doing is they're proposing the solution without defining the problem yet. So it's like they're leading with a solution to fix your problems without them really understanding what your problems are. So looking that way, we'd say work on the enterprise first, understand your needs, then look at the software. Let the problems pull you into the right software system, right?
Yep.
But what will BPM not give you? Well, if you accelerate or smooth out a process and not a constraint, it won't do anything for you. You can simplify process, cut staff, reduce operating costs, but if that's not the problem, and you're not selling, you're not going to have any benefit. Forrest could sit there and talk for the whole rest of this hour about Six Sigma experience with companies that had the same problem, right?
That's right.
They fixed the stuff that didn't matter.
Yeah, we talk about in Lean Six Sigma, a lot of times we have projects don't get done. You know, if the process owner's not asking for it. Why is that? Well, they have the same problem there, that they're not really working on the constraint in the organization as a whole, so it helps the financials. So the same thing can happen with BPM too.
Yep, you get all these people, get them lined up, and nobody wants to work in my group. I'm too busy. You can't come here. You get the same problem. Do the last poll. Where is your company with respect to business process management? And my guess to some of you, this was a new term. It just intrigued you. You're here for continuous education. But hopefully some of you are trying to figure out how to do this better within your own business. But you can be here from we're just considering it but haven't done anything over till we have one working. We're trying to do better. So if you'd please pick one on there, we appreciate this input. Looks like it's somewhat similar in shape to the last poll. The not started and the third one are the leading the leading the pack right now. Ooh, the late entries are changing it. We'll give you a couple seconds here. Please finish it. Lon, if you close that for us and post it up there. Well, see, a majority of you haven't really started. That's good, about 40%. If you haven't started, you have a chance of making sure you do it right. And I'll tell you, this enterprise process management, Forrest, we tell you that's also the right infrastructure if you're putting together a Six Sigma program too, isn't it?
That's right.
It really isn't any different.
No. Helps you figure out which projects that you should be working on, helps the big picture.
And the other one, there's about a quarter of you are in early implementation. Well, thank you for that. We'll go on with the presentation. This takes me to a coaching call I had today, Forrest, about someone working on project selection. I think I could have been given the same discussion to the BPM people about picking the right process for business process management. It's really about finding the ones that really matter. Very similar discussion.
Okay, the question is, I know the risk, what do I do? So you can go in and do a lot of pre-planning. It really helps you go in and pick the software suite. You know, you might do that, but the thing is, what we're suggesting is really one to focus on putting together the enterprise process management piece. So how can you go in and look at scorecards? How do you collect data? How do you manage it? How do you put together all the rules? You know, and then if you're going to go in and do automation, you're going to look at wherever my biggest constraint is, and if automation is appropriate, then I'm really going to be focusing on my efforts. And then I'm going to be picking the software suite that's going to be the most appropriate to help me out.
Yeah, notice the software was the last question. Now, some of you, what Forrest I've been talking about is like a whole change to your business system, but good companies may have a lot of this already in place. You just need to identify it, clean it up, link it together. It might be ready to go. You just might need a new tool to display it. We talk about scorecards and metrics. They're important. You have them, but maybe you're not getting everything you need out of them. So that's what you do to help reduce your risks. And I guess it's too late. Some of you are early in deployment, we saw from that earlier, from the poll, and some a little bit further along. If you already have a system in place, it's not too late. I mean, because you've got a next initiative coming, you can still better utilize your current ones. You can redirect it, but this is still something to go look at a couple times even through deployment. So no, it's not too late. Reduce the risk that it doesn't get real successful by working now.
And putting together that enterprise process management piece is something that I would suspect that some of the people that are actually the 25% that are involved in it, they may not have much of that. And so now you could go in and start putting together that enterprise process management piece of it, and that could actually help your BPM deployment in the future.
I guess one key one too is metrics. BPM is about the data, the process collecting data for management. But if you've got the enterprise piece in place, you're now looking at also data for management decisions, not process decisions, which sometimes get lost if you just focus on the process.
And the thing is also it affects not only the working in the bottleneck area, but also the day-to-day management if you have those metrics along the way too.
So you can, even if you're struggling or doing well, this can accelerate it, make it better if you consider the enterprise process. Can you do it yourself? I mean, one person did ask, you know, what can I do? Well, my guess is if you're even here, listen to this webinar, you've got some skills behind you because you got notification from us about it. That means you probably have a majority of the skills you need already. It's just about combining them into a roadmap to get it done right. But also, if you don't, you can still learn some of these tools before you go spend a lot of money on software. Now, some people do believe buy the software, let the software vendor train you. Now you get caught up with only one way to do things, and you're tied to that vendor for the rest of your life. Wouldn't you rather have general skills than software specific? I'd guess so. Now, it's those non-software vendor skills are what we provide our clients in this area to get them ready, and we can help you find good software solutions if you need one. Deployment skills. Forrest, do you want to talk to this one?
Talk to this one. So we're looking at how do you put together, we look at it as a BPM/EPM when you're really putting all this together here. So we want to go in and look at how you're actually going to go in and line this overall deployment so that it's business growth and that you're really improving the bottom line and that you're really not investing a lot of capital up front And so now we really want to help the big picture, because we want to have it so the executives see the benefit of this, the overall deployment. A lot of times it's happened in Lean Six Sigma and other different undertakings that they may have taken on, that the executives don't feel the benefit of that. And that's what we're suggesting by doing it the way we're approaching BPM/EPM implementation. The executives are going to see the difference as well.
That's right. Plus, understand most companies actually end up automating less than they planned when they work on the enterprise piece first, because they realize they don't need that expense everywhere. Now, we sort of title this the IEE, or Integrated Enterprise Excellence, BPM or EPM system, because we're trying to give a higher emphasis on the business management side than we are on the software side. So it makes us a little bit different than some of the helpers or consultants out there. I've been trying to talk Forrest into using our little phrase of putting the management back in BPM. But that's the way we sort of feel about it here. Either way you go at this, you're going to get something called BPM. We think we have you rather get one that's more effective and efficient. Now, Forrest?
Yeah, the Integrated Enterprise Excellence, if you've been working with us in the past, we've got quite a few books on that. And now we're actually going to be having another book coming out in September that's going to be pulling this all together. We're taking a lot of the concepts that we've talked about in the other books and put together with it this BPM notation. It was already in there, but it's really highlighting it a little bit more. And so, again, if you've looked at our material, we talked about the Enterprise Improvement Plan. So one of the things that could lead to is actually the implementation of the software that's going to automate some process in particular, again, that affect the big picture. So we looking at this would be the cost would be less perhaps than doing the automation of processes, but again, whenever you're actually going to go in or take the automation and the expense associated with it, then we're going to be focusing on where it's going to help the enterprise as a whole.
As it said, we think looking at the enterprise might delay the first automation by up to 6 months while you get your set right, but at least you'll know you're doing the right one.
It's a pre-planning, or they're planning ahead of time.
Yeah, I think of it a little bit like a design of experiments for us. You spend a lot more time planning than you do experiment.
That's right.
What could be your next steps? You could look at your own business system to see if it's ready. Do you have an existing business management system that could support identifying the constraints and automating? Or if you don't think you're quite up to it, you can get advice. Now, we would help with that. There's other people that can. You may have consultants that you use already, but asking that question may get you ready. It may slow you down. My guess you'd be a lot less apt to buy the wrong software. Now, of course, we'd love a chance to talk to you. Where's our information at the top? You'll get an email from us from this. You can also contact us again if you have questions. Now, we got a couple outstanding questions left to go. But I guess we'd like you to walk away from this. There is risk. Reduce it, be successful. And one of our other things, if we weren't too obvious about it, we don't think business process management should be an IT automation effort. It should be an effort to better manage your business, and that's the whole purpose of it. Forrest, I got a couple questions to go through. You want to take this one? It says, what's the point of designing the process on paper before you buy a BPM software that can use it?
Well, the thing is, if you don't go in and put it on paper, then the thing is, you may be doing like what Rick talked about earlier, you're automating a bad process. So I think the thing is, you still want to use some of the same methodologies we've done with Lean Six Sigma and other process improvement efforts. We want to figure out what we should actually do to improve the overall process. But I want to say also is that just by improving the process or moving things around is not necessarily going to improve the metrics. So we really want to have it so that this effort's actually improving a metric that, again, positively impacts the enterprise as a whole, business, financials.
And the other side of it, I mean, I listen to this question, I'd almost say, why would you ever want to buy software if you can't diagram and decide your process before you start? The nice thing about business process management now is it's been around long enough. There's some international standards, this BPMN 2.0. Nearly every software package, you can design the whole thing in it like Visio And when you've got it the way you like it, it will import and automatically build your automated process just from the flowchart. One of the advantages of using these suites. But the other one is, how do you know what software system would help you if you don't know what type of screens you're going to need, what type of data needs to be collected, how often it's needed, what format, how many users you're going to have, what kind of hardware they're going to have. At some level, you really need to design the whole process before you get software to know you're buying enough for it. I mean, think about a building. They spend a lot of time designing the building on paper before they ever start buying pieces to put it together.
Yeah, and BPM-N may be new to some people, but because that's more than just normal flow charting that people like in Lean Six Sigma are familiar with. It gets down to the real rules and decision rules. It's a very much more meticulous way of laying out the process. And like Rick was saying, is once you put it in this format, then it's more conducive to the automation.
That's right. Thanks for that. Another question. This says, do you assume that the QMS or ERP or whatever you're using is successfully implemented and used throughout the entire organization? And I don't think that's a requirement. I think usually the ERP system's only used by those groups that use it. They're never implemented across the whole company. A lot of places I worked, I never had access to it. In a QMS system, that's the quality management system. And I guess if you don't know, ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning Software. It's really how you do financials and planning and ordering and such. Not having them in place does not inhibit your BPM system. Having it in place doesn't either. But if you do have one that's working, even if it's not used by everybody, it should be a consideration if you're buying software to make sure they're compatible, that they can share data when you want to do your analysis of your process. Next one says lean management is lean management is the right method for a company to learn performing BPM right. The question is, the lean tools, the lean management tools, are they what you need to put in place before you do BPM? And I mean, I'll give you my opinion first. I think it's the lean management tools and such are still a good place to start if you've never needed them. They can look and examine and fix a lot of things, but they're probably not sufficient to do everything.
Yeah, I think the thing is Lean has got some real positive methodologies associated with it, but I think there's other things that are not often talked about in Lean that can help improvement process, design experiments, and things like that, because that's going to help you figure out what inputs you might have to control, and all that could be part of your automation and process if that's what you're actually doing when you're implementing the BPM. So I think you need to look at all the tools in the tool set to help you improve.
The one point is that Lean alone won't talk about metrics enough to really get you what you need. Mm-hmm. The last question we have right now, it says, is are you going to get a recording? And yes, you'll get an email about a recording be available within a day or two. So you can watch it again or share it with people. And here's one that just popped up. Why do you guys always talk about Lean Six Sigma with BPM? Well, I guess there's a good reason. We have a lot of experience, probably a little bit more in Six Sigma and Lean than we do the BPM. And this is still only part of BPM. But really, BPM, is business process management. One of the actions when you're going through the deployment is you define your existing as-is process, and then it says improve it as necessary, and it directs you to use Lean, Six Sigma, Total Quality Management, PDCA, and there was one more that they recommend. Yeah, the continuous improvement process. But Lean Six Sigma is one of the tools that they actually use through the BPM deployment. But the bigger reason I think is why we're talking about it more is there's so many lessons from Lean Six Sigma that can reduce the risk of business process management. Because at some level you're automating in BPM, but is that an improvement? I'd say you're really looking at a specific type of improvement to help your business process.
And you might mention also is that body of knowledge book that we made reference to earlier for BPM, they do make references to like Lean Six Sigma as a process improvement methodology.
Because they say once you define the as-is, you don't want to automate it as-is. Simplify it, automate it, or simplify and improve it some before you automate it. The Lean Six Sigma tools work, the Lean tools. Even 5S'ing works sometimes, but that's why we talk about it. But that's a great question. We could sound like we're giving a Lean Six Sigma lecture here, but we're really not. We do also have a belief for us that the people that are Lean Six Sigma trained would be an excellent resource in the business process management world too, because we've been taught a system view. We look at the ins and the outs. We look at performance measures. We really have most of the competencies right now to work in BPM. I think you'll see if you check our website, up through January, we're going to be coming out with some resources to help people move from Six Sigma or start from scratch to become a good BPM analyst and performer.
Yeah, we got some other papers that are coming out too, so you might check those out too. That's kind of building upon each other. And again, I want to mention that we're going to be having a book that's coming out in the not too distant future, so that it will help you start maybe figuring out how to put all this together and apply some of the concepts.
With Forrest, that'll be an ebook that'll be free on our website when it comes out for you. And you can also get hardback. We can sell hardback copies too. But we're not talking you spend a lot of money on learning right now. I think that's about it. Is there anywhere else any questions right now? Thanks everybody for them. It's been a fun webinar. I appreciate it. And keep in touch. There'll be more. In a day or two, you'll get an email that'll have a link to watch it recorded, or if you want to share it with somebody else. And those that signed up and didn't watch it will also get the email so they can watch it then. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.